Hi, everybody. Kevin Barhyde here. Thanks for tuning in. I was on the phone today with a friend of mine. We hadn't talked for probably about a year. We chatted for a while about the last couple of years, which were pretty rough for me. And I said, How have you been doing? How's things going for you? And he paused. And I said, Everything okay? And he paused again. And then he said, No, it's been kind of a rough year. My father was murdered. I can't imagine for a minute what it was like for him to tell me. I can't imagine for a minute what it's like to have lived the last year with that trauma and that sadness and that loss. And I can't for the life of me imagine getting that phone call and knowing that I'd never see my father again, knowing that he was gone, knowing that he'd been tragically murdered. Can't imagine that. Or to put it really more honestly, I don't want to. I don't want to imagine that. A dear friend of mine who I've known for a long time, she had adopted 2 children and asked me, Will you talk to my son? And her son was the same age as mine. I said, Sure, what's going on? She said, Well, he's been struggling with addiction. I think he's an addict. Will you be able to help him? And I did what I always tell you folks that I would do. I said, Sure, I'll do what I can. And we went to meetings and we sat at Panera and we talked for a long time and we were in each other's lives and I loved him very much and cared about him. I even knew him when he was growing up, when he was little. I got the call from his mom that he had OD'd and he had died. And it was tragedy and it was awful and we all experienced it together. A couple of months ago, she and I were having dinner and we were talking and she confronted me kindly with love, with all the compassion and caring in her heart. She said, Kevin, if you can't imagine losing your own son, then you can't understand how I feel. And I need you to understand how I feel. And I almost involuntarily yelled in the middle of the restaurant, No, no. And she, tears in her eyes, said, But if you can't even imagine it for a minute, then how can you understand how I feel? And I stopped and I understood what she was asking. And I did imagine. And the tears came to my eyes as I imagined my own son laying in his bed, OD'd, dead. I don't even want to say the words. It hurts just to think about that. But then I looked at her and I said, I think I understand. To me, it's kind of that way with adoption. With me being an adoptee, I really want to be able to tell people who aren't adopted, this is what it feels like sometimes. And they'll ask me, well, is that what it feels like for all adoptees? And I say, no, we all feel different. And they'll say, well, then why did it happen to you? And I'll say, there's so many moving parts to this. There's so many pieces to the puzzle. And I think I want to do just what my friend did with me. I think I want to ask them, please, can you just imagine for a minute what it might be like if you were adopted? Can you imagine what it might be like if the mother that you know wasn't your mother? If the mother that gave birth to you, you never knew her, you never met her, you never had a relationship with her, you never touched her or hugged her or got to see her face or hear her voice? Can you imagine that? And I know it sounds cruel, it almost sounds inhuman. I would not want to imagine that. If I had been raised by a loving mother and father, and that was my family, and maybe my brothers and my sisters and my extended family, to erase them all, to make it like it had never happened, and even worse, to just live a life wondering, I wouldn't want to wish that on anyone. And yet maybe that would be the beginning of empathy and compassion. And maybe that would be a very different conversation instead of someone asking me, is that why you behave the way you did? Is that why you feel the way you do? Is that why it's difficult for you to have relationships? Is that why you're afraid that everyone would leave you? Instead of asking those questions, maybe the conversation would start with, oh my God, I can kind of understand. If I had no family that I knew, I might be in those same shoes. Not every adoptee has the same reactions. And maybe if only I was adopted, and that's a big deal for me, maybe I wouldn't have had any of these issues. Maybe if I was only adopted and had been sexually abused, maybe that would have added up and maybe those would have been the causes for all these issues in my life. Or maybe, as many of you know, if I was adopted and had been sexually abused and became an addict and alcoholic, maybe that would make a lot of sense to you and me and all the folks that really wonder, what happened? What happened to Kevin? But I really can't answer that straight up to you. I don't know if it was a chicken or an egg. I don't know if it was the adoption or the abuse. I don't know if it was the drugs or the alcohol. I don't know what happened, when, in what order, but I do know these are the factors that I live with in my life. These are the pieces of me that feel broken. This is the primal wound that I talk about with the adoption and the abandonment. That's a fact in my life. It's not a fact in every adoptee's life, nor would I wish it to be. But wherever we start from, wherever we are in this process of understanding who we are, I'll be honest with you, it'd be a lot more helpful if folks could have that level of empathy and imagine for a minute, what if it had happened to them? I just want to start the conversation from there. I really don't want to imagine what it's like for my friend to have gone through losing his father. But I can for a second, just enough so that I can be in his shoes and so that when I'm facing him, I can have that level of empathy. So I'll continue to try to have these moments of imagining when I see someone else going through something that I don't understand, that I haven't lived through, that I really have no sense of kinship with. I'll keep trying to do that. And I hope you will too. I really hope that we'll come back and have more of these conversations. Leave your comments below as always. Thanks so much for joining me, taking the time to listen to me today and enjoying this community together. Please like the video, share with everyone that you know, and please, I know a lot of you are watching and aren't subscribed. If you can, please subscribe. Click that button right now. Subscribe. I can't wait to see you next week. Thanks again. Take care.